My name is Ethan Caldwell, and I never believed in ghosts until they started whispering my name. It began with a message on my phone from an app I didn't install, telling me they were watching. Then came the notes slipped under my door, scrawled in jagged red ink. Look behind the mirror. A voice, not in the air but inside my head, spoke of secrets I'd buried deep: my mother's lullaby, my brother's treehouse, the night my father left. In Brighthaven, where 4 people vanished without a trace, I found a truth that chilled my blood. The Otherworld isn't just a place, it's a mirror, reflecting our fears, our guilt, our forgotten past. Every hum in the air, every shadow in the corner, pulls me closer to a door I'm not sure I can resist. Will I step through, or will it take me like it took them? Dive into chilling messages from the other side, real-life dailies to uncover the haunting truth. I've never been one for ghost stories. The idea of spirits whispering from beyond the grave always seemed like something cooked up to scare kids around a campfire. But that was before the messages started, before my life unraveled in ways I couldn't explain, before I began to question everything I thought I knew about the world. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and this is the story of how I stumbled into the Otherworld, a place that's not quite here, not quite there, but close enough to make your skin crawl. It began on a cold November evening, the kind where the wind bites at your knuckles and the sky looks like it's holding its breath. I was 32, living alone in a small apartment on the edge of Brighthaven, a sleepy coastal town where nothing much happened. I worked as a freelance journalist, scraping by on local interest pieces for the Brighthaven Gazette. My life was quiet, predictable, the kind of routine you sink into without noticing. But that night, as I sat at my desk, the world tilted. The first message came through my phone. Not a text or an email, but a notification from an app I didn't remember installing. It was called Whisperlink, with an icon like a cracked mirror. The notification read, "Ethan, they're watching you. Check the window." My heart gave a little lurch, not because I believed it, but because it used my name. I glanced at the window across the room, half expecting to see some prankster's face pressed against the glass. Nothing, just the black night, and the faint reflection of my own tired eyes. I tapped the notification, but the app wouldn't open. Instead, my phone froze, the screen flickering with static before shutting off entirely. I cursed under my breath, thinking it was a virus or some scam. But when I powered the phone back on, the app was gone, like it had never existed. I might have written it off as a glitch if not for what happened next. A low hum filled the apartment, like the buzz of a fluorescent light about to burn out. It wasn't coming from anywhere specific, just everywhere, all at once. I stood, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor, and checked every room. The kitchen, the bathroom, the closet. Nothing. The hum grew louder, vibrating in my chest, and then, just as suddenly, it stopped. In its place came a voice. Not from the air, but inside my head, clear as if someone were standing next to me. "They see you, Ethan. They know what you've forgotten." I froze, my pulse hammering. The voice was soft, almost gentle, but it carried a weight that made my knees weak. I'm not a man who scares easily. I've covered stories about accidents, fires, even a murder once. But this was different. This wasn't just fear. It was dread, the kind that sinks into your bones and makes you question your own sanity. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch, staring at the window, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. By morning, I convinced myself it was a trick of the mind, a stress-induced hallucination. I had been working too hard, digging into a story about a string of disappearances in Brighthaven over the past decade. 4 people, 3 women, and 1 man had vanished without a trace, their cases unsolved. I'd been poring over old police reports, interviewing families, chasing leads that went nowhere. Maybe the stress was getting to me. But the messages didn't stop. Over the next few days, they came in different forms. A note slipped under my door, written in jagged handwriting. "You're closer than you think." An email from an address that didn't exist, containing only the words, "Look behind the mirror." I checked every mirror in my apartment, half expecting to find some hidden camera or a prankster's calling card. Nothing, just my own reflection, looking more haggard each day. I started to notice patterns. The messages always came at night, always vague but personal, like they knew me better than I knew myself. They mentioned things I hadn't thought about in years, my mother's old lullaby, the treehouse I built with my brother when we were kids, the smell of rain on the night my father left us. It was as if someone or something was pulling memories from the deepest corners of my mind and dangling them in front of me. I tried to ignore it, to focus on my work, but the disappearances and the messages started to blur together. One of the missing, a woman named Clara Henshaw, had been a librarian who lived just a few blocks from me. Her sister, Margaret, agreed to meet me at a coffee shop to talk about her. Margaret was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a voice that trembled when she spoke about Clara. She was always talking about dreams, Margaret said, stirring her coffee absently. Said she saw things in them places that weren't real. She called it the Otherworld. I thought it was just her imagination, but she was so sure. She said it was like a shadow of our world, just out of reach. I scribbled notes, my hand shaking slightly. The word Otherworld hit me like a punch. I hadn't told anyone about the messages, but Margaret's words echoed the voice in my head. I pressed her for more, but she shook her head. She stopped talking about it a few weeks before she disappeared, Margaret said. Said it was too dangerous, that they didn't like being watched. Who's they? I asked, my throat dry. Margaret looked at me, her eyes narrowing. She never said. But she was scared, Ethan, really scared. That night, the messages took a darker turn. I found a piece of paper taped to my fridge, the words scrawled in red ink. "Stop looking, or you'll join them." I tore it down, my heart pounding, and checked every lock in the apartment. I didn't sleep again. Instead, I sat at my desk, staring at the files on the disappearances, trying to find a connection. Clara Henshaw, Michael Tate, Sarah Billings, Emily Vos. All of them had lived in Brighthaven. All of them had vanished within a 2-mile radius of my apartment. And now, someone or something was warning me to stop. I couldn't stop. Not because I was brave, but because the messages were starting to feel like a puzzle when I was meant to solve. I thought about my brother, Lucas, who lived a few towns over. We hadn't spoken in years, not since our mother's funeral. But he was the only family I had left, and something told me I needed to talk to him. Maybe it was the mention of the treehouse in one of the messages, or maybe it was just a gut feeling. Either way, I called him. "Ethan?" Lucas's voice was groggy, like I'd woken him. "It's 2 in the morning." "I know," I said, my voice hoarse. "I need to see you. It's important." He hesitated, then sighed. "Fine, come by tomorrow, but you owe me an explanation." I hung up, my hands trembling. The hum was back, louder this time, and the voice came with it, sharper, more insistent. "You're running out of time, Ethan. They're waiting." I didn't know who they were, or what they wanted, But I knew one thing for certain. The Otherworld was real, and it was closer than I'd ever imagined. As I sat there, the weight of the unknown pressing down on me, I realized I wasn't just chasing a story anymore. I was part of it. The drive to Lucas's place felt longer than it should have, even though it was only an hour from Brighthaven. The coastal road twisted through fog-soaked pines, the kind of scenery that made you feel like you were slipping out of the world. My hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few minutes, half expecting to see something or someone following me. The messages hadn't stopped since last night. Another note had appeared, this time tucked into the pocket of my jacket. The treehouse remembers. It was written in that same jagged script, the ink smudged like it had been written in a hurry. Lucas lived in a small house on the outskirts of Crestwood, a town even quieter than Brighthaven. He was 3 years older than me, 35 now, and had always been the practical one. While I chased stories and half-baked dreams, Lucas built a life as a carpenter, steady and grounded. But we hadn't been close since our mother died 6 years ago. Her death drove a wedge between us, though I could never quite say why. Maybe it was the way grief makes you turn inward, or maybe it was the secrets we both kept. I pulled into his driveway just after noon, the sky heavy with clouds that promised rain. Lucas was waiting on the porch, his arms crossed, his face a mix of curiosity and irritation. He looked like a broader, rougher version of me, same dark hair, same gray eyes, but with a hardness I'd never had. He didn't smile as I got out of the car. "You look like hell," he said, his voice gruff. "Thanks," I muttered, shoving my hands into my pockets. The note was still there, crumpled against my fingers. "Can we talk inside?" He led me into the house, a cozy place cluttered with woodworking tools and half-finished projects. The air smelled of sawdust and coffee. We sat at his kitchen table, and I told him everything. The messages, the voice, the hum, the disappearances. I left out the part about the Otherworld, not because I didn't trust him, but because I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Lucas listened, his face unreadable, until I mentioned the treehouse. "That's why I'm here," I said, pulling the note from my pocket and sliding it across the table. "This showed up last night. It's not the first one." He picked up the paper, his brow furrowing as he read the words. "The treehouse remembers," he said slowly, like he was tasting the phrase. "What the hell does that mean?" "You tell me," I said. "We built that thing together, remember? Back at Mom's old place in Brighthaven. It's still there, in the woods behind the house." Lucas leaned back, his chair creaking. "Yeah, I remember. We were what, 10 and 13? Spent all summer hammering boards into that oak tree. Mom used to bring us lemonade while we work." His voice softened for a moment, then hardened again. "But that doesn't explain why someone's sending you creepy notes about it." "I don't know," I admitted, "but it's not just the notes. There's a voice, Lucas. It's inside my head. It knows things. Things about me, about us. And it's tied to those disappearances I've been investigating." He stared at me, his eyes searching mine. "You're not messing with me, are you?" "I wish I was." He stood, pacing the small kitchen. "This is crazy, Ethan. You sound like Mom did toward the end. All that talk about dreams and other worlds. You remember how she got?" I flinched. Our mother, Eliza, had always been a dreamer, but in her final years, she'd started talking about things that didn't make sense, visions, shadows, a place she called the Otherworld. Lucas thought it was dementia. I wasn't so sure anymore. "She wasn't crazy," I said quietly. "What if she was onto something? What if this other world is real? Lucas stopped pacing and looked at me like I'd grown a second head. You're a journalist, Ethan. You deal in facts, not fairy tales. Then explain the notes, I shot back. Explain the voice. Explain why 4 people vanished in Brighthaven, and now someone's telling me to stop looking. He didn't have an answer. Instead, he grabbed his jacket. Come on, if this is about the treehouse, let's go see it. We drove back to Brighthaven in my car, the silence between us thick with unspoken questions. The old family house was still there, though it had been sold years ago. The new owners didn't care about the woods out back, so the treehouse, our treehouse, still stood, hidden among the oaks. As we approached, the air felt heavier, like the world was holding its breath again. The treehouse was weathered but intact, its boards gray and splintered, the rope ladder long gone. We climbed up using the nails we'd hammered in as kids, now rusted but sturdy. Inside, it was smaller than I remembered, barely big enough for 2 grown men to crouch. The walls were covered in our old carvings, initials, doodles, a crooked star we'd etched with a pocket knife. But there was something new. Scratched into the wood in that same jagged script as the notes were the words, "They're here." My stomach dropped. Lucas saw it too, his face paling. "This wasn't here before," he said, his voice low. Before I could respond, the hum started again, louder than ever, vibrating through the treehouse. The air grew cold, sharp, like a blade against my skin. And then the voice came, not just in my head this time, but all around us, echoing off the wooden walls. "You've found the door, Ethan. Now open it." Lucas grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "What the hell is that?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My eyes were locked on the floor of the treehouse, where a faint glow was seeping through the cracks in the wood. It wasn't light, not exactly. It was something else, something that pulsed like a heartbeat. I reached down, my fingers brushing the boards, and they felt warm, alive. Against my better judgment, I pressed harder, and the wood gave way, not breaking but shifting, like it was melting into itself. Beneath it was a void. Not darkness, but a shimmering liquid-like expanse that seemed to stretch forever. Shapes moved within it, shadows that weren't quite human, eyes that blinked too slowly. I stumbled back, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. "Ethan," Lucas whispered, his voice trembling. "What is that?" I didn't know, but I knew it was the Otherworld, the place Clara Henshaw had dreamed about, the place my mother had seen in her final days. And it was calling to me. The glow from the treehouse floor pulsed like a living thing, casting shadows that danced across the walls. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I forgot Lucas was there, forgot everything except the impossible void beneath us. It wasn't just a hole, it was a doorway, a tear in the fabric of the world, and it was pulling at me, whispering my name in a voice that wasn't the one I'd heard before. This was older, deeper, like the groan of the earth itself. "Ethan, get back!" Lucas's voice snapped me out of it. He yanked me away from the edge, his hands shaking as he pulled me toward the ladder. "We're getting out of here, now." I wanted to argue, to stay and see what was on the other side, but the fear in his eyes stopped me. Lucas wasn't the type to scare easily. He'd faced down bullies, storms, even our father's temper when we were kids, but he looked terrified now, his face pale as the moonlight filtering through the trees. We scrambled down the nails, the wood creaking under our weight, and hit the ground running. The hum followed us, softer now, but still there, like a heartbeat in the air. We didn't stop until we reached my car, parked at the edge of the woods. I fumbled with the keys, My hands slick with sweat, and we piled in, slamming the doors. Lucas was breathing hard, his hands clenched into fists. "What the hell was that, Ethan?" he demanded. "What's going on?" "I don't know," I said, my voice unsteady. "But it's real. You saw it. You heard it." He didn't respond, just stared out the windshield, his jaw tight. I started the car and drove back to my apartment, the silence between us heavier than ever. The note about the treehouse was still in my pocket, its words burning in my mind. The treehouse remembers. It wasn't just a memory, it was a clue, a piece of a puzzle I didn't understand but couldn't ignore. Back at my place, I made coffee while Lucas sat on the couch, still shaken. I told him about Clara Henshaw's dreams, about our mother's talk of the otherworld, about the disappearances. I showed him the other notes, the ones I'd kept in a drawer, 5 in total now, each more cryptic than the last. "They see you. Look behind the mirror. Stop looking, or you'll join them." And the latest, about the treehouse. Lucas read them, his expression darkening with each one. "This is insane," he said finally, tossing the notes onto the coffee table. "You're saying some supernatural thing is leaving you messages, and it's tied to those missing people." "I know how it sounds," I said. "But you were there. You saw the void." He rubbed his face, looking older than his 35 years. "Okay, let's say this is real. What do we do about it?" I didn't have an answer, not yet. But I knew we couldn't just walk away. The otherworld, whatever it was, had chosen us for a reason. I thought about our mother, how she'd spent her last days scribbling in a notebook, muttering about shadows and doors. I dismissed it as grief, but now I wasn't so sure. "We need to go back to Mom's things," I said. "Her notebooks, her letters. Maybe there's something there, something she knew." Lucas hesitated, then nodded. "They're in storage. I kept them after the house was sold." "But Ethan, if this is as dangerous as you say, we need to be careful." We drove to Crestwood the next morning, to a storage unit Lucas rented on the edge of town. The air was damp, the sky a bruised gray, and every rustle of leaves made me jump. The unit was packed with boxes, most of them labeled in Lucas's neat handwriting. We found Mom's stuff in a corner, 3 cardboard boxes filled with books, clothes, and a stack of leather-bound notebooks. I hadn't seen them in years, and the sight of her handwriting, all loops and flourishes, hit me like a wave. We brought the notebooks back to Lucas's house and spread them out on his kitchen table. There were 7 in total, each filled with sketches and cryptic entries. Most of it was nonsense, poems, fragments of dreams, but one page caught my eye. It was a drawing of a tree, unmistakably the oak where we'd built the treehouse, with a glowing circle at its base. Below it, in Mom's handwriting, were the words, "The otherworld is a mirror. It sees what we hide. It takes what we forget." "Jesus," Lucas muttered, leaning over my shoulder. She knew about it. "There's more," I said, flipping through the pages. Another entry described a dream where Mom stood in a place not here, not there, surrounded by figures she couldn't see clearly. "They watch us," she wrote. "They wait for us to open the door." There was no explanation of who they were, but the word sent a chill down my spine. It was the same word Clara's sister had used, the same word in the messages. We spent hours reading, piecing together fragments. Mom had been obsessed with the idea of a parallel world, a shadow realm that existed alongside ours. She believed it was tied to Brighthaven, to specific places like the treehouse where the veil between worlds was thin. She'd written about anchors, objects, or places that held the door open. The treehouse was one. There were others, though she didn't name them. As we read, the hum returned, faint at first, then louder, filling the room. Lucas froze, his eyes wide. "You hear that?" I nodded, my heart racing. The air grew cold, and the lights flickered, casting long shadows across the table. Then, on the page I was holding, new words appeared. Not in Mom's handwriting, but in that jagged script I'd come to dread. "You're too late." The notebook slipped from my hands, hitting the floor with a thud. Lucas swore, backing away from the table. I grabbed the book, my fingers trembling, and saw the words fade, like ink sinking into water. But they'd been there. We'd both seen them. "We need to find the others," I said, my voice hoarse. "The other anchors. If Mom was right, they're connected to the disappearances." Lucas shook his head, his face pale. "Ethan, this is bigger than us. We're not ghost hunters, we're not. Whatever this needs." But I couldn't stop. The other world was real, and it was reaching out, pulling us in. I thought of Clara, Michael, Sarah, Emily, all gone, all taken by something I was only beginning to understand. And I thought of Mom, her warnings, her fear. Whatever was on the other side, it knew us, it wanted us. And I was starting to think it had always been waiting. The words fading into the notebook felt like a line we'd crossed, a point of no return. Lucas wanted to burn the damn thing, but I wouldn't let him. Those notebooks were all we had of Mom's thoughts, her warnings, and I was convinced they held the key to whatever was happening. The hum had stopped, but the air in Lucas's kitchen still felt wrong, like the room was holding its breath, waiting for us to make a move. I didn't know what that move should be, but I knew we couldn't stay still. "We need help," I said, stacking the notebooks carefully. "Someone who knows more about this. Whatever this is." Lucas snorted, but there was no humor in it. "What, like a psychic, a priest? This isn't a movie, Ethan." "No," I said, my mind racing. "Someone who's seen it. Someone who's been close to it." I thought of Margaret, Clara Henshaw's sister, and her talk of the other world. She'd known something, even if she didn't realize it. "I'm going back to Brighthaven. I need to talk to Margaret again." Lucas didn't argue, which surprised me. Instead, he grabbed his keys. "I'm coming with you. No way I'm letting you do this alone." We drove back to Brighthaven under a sky that seemed heavier than before, the clouds pressing down like a lid on the world. I called Margaret from the road, catching her just as she was leaving the library where Clara had worked. She agreed to meet us at the same coffee shop, though her voice was wary, like she sensed trouble coming. The coffee shop was nearly empty when we arrived, the air thick with the smell of burnt espresso. Margaret was already there, sitting in a corner booth, her hands wrapped around a mug. She looked older than she had a few days ago, her eyes shadowed with something that wasn't just grief. I introduced Lucas, and we sat across from her, the notebooks tucked into my bag like a guilty secret. "I told you everything I know about Clara," Margaret said before I could speak. "Why are you here?" I hesitated, glancing at Lucas. He nodded, a silent go-ahead. So I told her not everything, but enough. The messages, the voice, the treehouse. I left out the void, the glowing doorway, because even now, it felt too insane to say out loud. But I showed her the note about the treehouse, and her face went still. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It showed up," I said. "I don't know how. But it's not the first one. And it's connected to Clara, to the others who disappeared. I think you know more than you're saying." Margaret's hands tightened around her mug, her knuckles white. Clara was different, toward the end. She'd always had vivid dreams, but they got worse. She said she saw a place, a shadow world, she called it. She'd wake up crying, saying they were watching her. She wouldn't tell me who they were, but she was terrified. And then she started talking about anchors. My heart skipped. Anchors? Like places or objects? Margaret nodded. She said there were places in Brighthaven where the world was thin, where you could cross over. She thought the library was one. She spent hours there, even after her shifts, reading old books, looking for something. She never told me what. Lucas leaned forward, his voice low. Did she ever mention a treehouse? Margaret's eyes flicked to him, then back to me. No, but she mentioned a mirror. She said it wasn't just a reflection, it was a door. I thought she was losing it, but now. She trailed off, her gaze distant. After she disappeared, I found a drawing in her apartment. It was a mirror with the same kind of writing as your note. I felt a chill, remembering the message. Look behind the mirror. Do you still have it? I asked. She shook her head. The police took it, along with her things. Evidence, they said. But they didn't care about her dreams, her stories. They thought it was a runaway case, or worse. I leaned back, my mind racing. The library, the treehouse, the mirror pieces of a puzzle that didn't yet fit. Margaret, I said carefully, do you think Clara crossed over into this otherworld? Her eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw fear there, raw and unfiltered. I don't know, she said. But if she did, she didn't come back. We left the coffee shop with more questions than answers. Margaret promised to call if she remembered anything else, but I could tell she was shaken. Lucas was quiet as we walked back to the car, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. This is getting out of hand, he said finally. We're chasing ghosts, Ethan. Literally. Maybe, I said. But they're not chasing us. They're leading us somewhere. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay on my couch, the notebooks spread out on the coffee table, their pages glowing faintly in the lamplight. I kept coming back to Mom's drawing of the tree, the words about the other world being a mirror. I thought about Clara, about the library, about the disappearances. 4 people, all gone, all tied to Brighthaven. And now the messages, the void, the voice, they were tied to me. Around midnight, the hum started again, softer this time, almost soothing. I sat up, my heart pounding, and checked the windows, the doors. Everything was locked, but it didn't matter. The air shifted, grew heavy, and then I saw a mirror on the wall, one I'd barely noticed before, a cheap thing that came with the apartment. Its surface was rippling, like water disturbed by a stone. I approached it slowly, my reflection distorted, my face stretching and twisting. The voice came again, not in my head but from the mirror itself, low and urgent. Ethan, the door is open. Step through. My hand moved before I could stop it, reaching for the glass. My fingers brushed the surface, and it was cold, impossibly cold, like touching the heart of winter. The ripples parted, revealing not my reflection, but a place of gray, endless expanse where shapes moved in the distance, their forms blurred, but watchful. Eyes glinted, too many to count, and I felt their gaze like a weight on my chest. I yanked my hand back, stumbling away from the mirror. The hum stopped, and the reflection snapped back to normal, just my pale, terrified face staring back. But I knew what I'd seen. The other world wasn't just real, it was here, in my apartment, in every mirror, every shadow. And it wanted me to cross over. The mirror stayed quiet after that night, but its silence was worse than the voice. It sat there, a blank eye on my wall, watching me. I covered it with a sheet, but I could still feel it, like a pulse in the room. Sleep was a lost cause. Every creak of the apartment, every shadow that flickered in the corner of my eye, sent my heart racing. The Otherworld wasn't just a place anymore, it was a presence seeping into my life, my thoughts, my sanity. Lucas came over the next morning, his face grim. He'd barely spoken since the coffee shop, but I could tell he was in deep now, whether he wanted to be or not. "You look worse than yesterday," he said, dropping a bag of takeout on my kitchen counter. "When's the last time you ate?" I shrugged, my mind still on the mirror, the void, the notebooks. "I'm fine. We need to figure out the anchors. Mom's notes said there are others, not just the treehouse and the mirror. If we find them, maybe we can stop this." "Stop what?" Lucas asked, his voice sharp. "You don't even know what this is, Ethan. People disappearing? Some shadow world? We're out of our depth." He was right, but I couldn't admit it. Not when the messages kept coming. That morning, I'd found another note. This one slipped into the pages of Mom's notebook. "The library holds the key." It was the same jagged script, the same red ink, and it pointed me back to Clara Henshaw, to the place where she'd spent her final days. "We're going to the library," I said, grabbing my jacket. Clara knew something. Margaret said she was obsessed with it, looking for answers. If there's an anchor there, we need to find it. Lucas didn't argue, but his silence was heavy, like he was carrying the weight of our childhood, our mother's secrets, and now this. We drove to the Brighthaven Public Library, a squat brick building that looked like it hadn't been updated in decades. The air inside smelled of old paper and dust, and the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, reminding me too much of the hum. The librarian, a woman named Helen with gray hair and sharp eyes, recognized me from my earlier visits about Clara. "You're back," she said, her tone cautious. "Margaret called. Said you might come asking questions." "We're not here to cause trouble," I said, trying to sound calm. "We just need to know about Clara, what she was working on before she disappeared." Helen hesitated, then led us to a back room, a cluttered archive filled with boxes and shelves of old records. "Clara spent a lot of time here," she said, pointing to a table in the corner. She was reading about the town's history, especially the old legends. Brighthaven's got a strange past, you know. People used to talk about thin places where the world wasn't quite right. My pulse quickened. Thin places, like doorways? Helen nodded, her eyes narrowing. "Old stories. Fishermen said they saw things out at sea lights, shapes, voices calling from the fog. Some said there were places on land too, where you could slip through to somewhere else." Clara was fascinated by it. She thought the library was one of those places. Lucas shifted beside me, his discomfort obvious. "Did she find anything? A book, a map, anything specific?" Helen pointed to a shelf in the corner. She kept going back to the same book. "It's still there, I think. Nobody's touched it since she left." We thanked her and approached the shelf. The book was old, its leather cover cracked and faded. The title barely legible, Tales of the Veil. I pulled it down, my hands trembling, and opened it to a page marked with a slip of paper. Brighthaven's anchors, places where the barrier between worlds was weak. There were 3 listed: a tree in the woods, a mirror in an old house, and a stone in the library's basement. My heart stopped. The tree was our treehouse. The mirror was in my apartment. And the stone. "We need to see the basement," I said to Helen. She frowned but led us to a locked door at the back of the archive. "It's just storage," she said, unlocking it. "Old books, broken furniture. Nothing special." The basement was cold and damp, the air thick with the smell of mildew. A single bulb cast weak light over stacks of crates and shelves. In the center of the room stood a stone about 3 feet tall, rough and unpolished, with faint carvings etched into its surface. They weren't words, not exactly, more like symbols, twisting and looping in ways that hurt to look at. "This is it," I whispered, my voice echoing in the silence. Lucas stood beside me, his breath uneven. Before we could move closer, the hum started again, louder than ever, vibrating through the stone. The symbols glowed faintly, pulsing in time with the sound. And then the voice came, not from my head or the air, but from the stone itself, sharp and commanding. "You found the heart, Ethan. Now break it." I stumbled back, my head spinning. Lucas grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "What the hell does that mean?" "I don't know," I said, but I was lying. I knew what it meant. The stone was an anchor, a tether holding the other world to ours. And they, whoever they were, wanted me to destroy it. But why? And what would happen if I did? Helen was watching us, her face pale. "You hear it too, don't you?" she said, her voice barely audible. Clara heard it. She stood right where you are, listening, and then she was gone. I turned to her, my stomach twisting. "What do you mean, gone?" "She came down here the night she disappeared," Helen said. "I found her notes later, hidden in the book. She said the stone was calling her, telling her to cross over. I didn't believe it, not until now." I pulled tailies of the veil from my bag and flipped to the marked page. Tucked inside was a folded piece of paper, Clara's handwriting scrawled across it. "The other world takes what we give it. It's not a place, it's a mirror of us, our fears, our secrets. The anchors keep it close. Break them, and it falls apart. But there's a price." Lucas reached over my shoulder, his face grim. "A price? What kind of price?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because as I stood there, the stone's glow intensified and the air shifted, growing heavy, like a storm about to break. The symbols twisted, forming new shapes, and I saw it, a face, not human, not entirely, staring out from the stone. Its eyes were endless, pulling at me, promising answers, promising truth. And then I heard my mother's voice, faint but clear, woven into the hum. "Ethan, don't. It's not what you think." I froze, my heart pounding. Lucas didn't hear it. He was staring at the stone, his face a mask of fear. But I knew it was her. Mom, who'd known about the other world, who'd tried to warn us. And now she was here, or there, or somewhere in between, begging me to stop. But I couldn't, not yet. The truth was too close, the puzzle almost complete. The other world was a mirror, reflecting our world, our secrets, our fears. And I was starting to think it wasn't just watching us, it was feeding on us. The basement felt like a tomb, the air thick with the hum, the stone's glow casting eerie shadows that seemed to move on their own. My mother's voice echoed in my head, "Ethan, don't. It's not what you think." But the pull of the other world was stronger, a siren call promising answers to questions I'd carried my whole life. Lucas stood beside me, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists. Helen was frozen near the door, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and recognition, as if she'd seen this moment before in Clara's final days. The stone pulsed, its symbols writhing like living things, and the face I'd glimpsed within it grew clearer, not human, not animal, but something in between, with eyes that held too much knowledge, too much hunger. The voice came again, not my mother's this time, but the one that had haunted me for weeks, sharp and commanding. "Break the anchor, Ethan. Free us. Free yourself." I stepped closer, my hand trembling as I reached for the stone. Clara's note burned in my mind. The other world is a mirror. Break the anchors, and it falls apart. But there's a price. I didn't know what the price was, but I felt it, heavy as the air around me, heavy as the truth I was about to uncover. "Ethan, stop!" Lucas grabbed my arm, his voice rough with panic. "You heard Mom. Whatever this is, it's not worth it." I shook him off, my eyes locked on the stone. "We have to know, Lucas, for Mom, for Clara, for all of them. This is why they disappeared. This is why they're gone." Helen spoke, her voice barely audible. "Clara stood there, just like you. She touched the stone, and then she was gone. Like she'd never been." Her words sent a chill through me, but they didn't stop me. I couldn't stop, not now. The other world wasn't just a place, it was a truth, a reflection of everything we hid, everything we feared. It had taken 4 people, Clara, Michael, Sarah, Emily, and it had taken my mother's sanity, maybe her life. I needed to know why. My fingers brushed the stone, and the world shifted. The hum became a roar, the glow blinding, and the basement dissolved around me. I was somewhere else, not here, not there, but in between. A gray expanse where the air was thick and the ground pulsed like a heartbeat. Shapes moved in the distance, their forms shifting, never solid. And then I saw them, the missing. Clara, her eyes wide with terror. Michael, his face blank, like he'd forgotten who he was. Sarah and Emily, their forms fading, like they were being erased. And at the center, my mother, her eyes pleading, her hands reaching for me. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice cutting through the roar. "You can't break it. The anchors aren't just doors. They're chains. They hold the other world back. If you break them, it comes through." I staggered, the weight of her words crashing over me. The other world's voice spoke again, louder, insistent. "She lies. Break the stone, and you'll know everything. You'll be free." But I saw it now, in my mother's eyes, in the fear that radiated from the others. The other world wasn't just a mirror, it was a predator, feeding on our secrets, our guilt, our pain. The anchors didn't just connect our world to theirs. They kept it contained. Clara had tried to break them, and it had taken her. My mother had known, had tried to warn us, and it had driven her to the edge. I pulled my hand back, the stone's glow dimming slightly. The other world's voice grew desperate, its words sharp as knives. "You can't stop now, you're part of us. You've always been." And that's when I understood. The messages, the voice, the notes, they weren't just warnings or threats. They were invitations. The other world had chosen me because I was like Clara, like my mother, someone who saw too much, felt too much, carried too many secrets. My father's abandonment, my mother's death, the distance between me and Lucas, it saw all of it, and it wanted more. "No," I said, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. "I'm not yours." The roar intensified, the shapes closing in, their eyes glinting with malice. But I felt my mother's presence, her strength, and I knew what I had to do. I turned to Lucas, who was somehow still there, his form flickering in the gray light. "We need to seal it," I said. "The anchors. We can't break them, we have to strengthen them." "How?" he asked, his voice trembling but resolute. I didn't know, not exactly, but Clara's note had said the other world was a mirror. If it reflected us, maybe we could reflect something back, something stronger. I thought of the treehouse, the mirror, the stone. They weren't just places. They were memories, pieces of our lives. I grabbed Lucas's hand, grounding myself, and focused on the strongest memory I had building the treehouse with him. Our mother's laughter, the summer we were whole. The gray expanse shuddered, the shapes retreating. The stone's glow flickered, and I felt the hum weaken, like a storm losing its strength. My mother's voice came again, softer now, but clear. "You're enough, Ethan. You always were." The basement snapped back into focus, the stone dim, the hum gone. Lucas was breathing hard, his hand still gripping mine. Helen was slumped against the wall, tears streaming down her face. The stone was just a stone now, its symbols faded, its power quiet. We left the library in silence, the weight of what we'd done or hadn't done settling over us. Back at my apartment, I took down the sheet covering the mirror. It was just glass now, no ripples, no voices. The treehouse, when we checked it later, was empty, its floor solid, no void beneath. The anchors were still there, but they were dormant, holding the other world at bay. Lucas stayed with me for a few days, and we talked more than we had in years about Mom, about our childhood, about the secrets we'd kept. The disappearances remained unsolved, at least officially, but I knew the truth. Clara, Michael, Sarah, Emily, they'd crossed over, drawn by the Otherworld's promises, and they'd paid the price. I wrote about it, not for the Gazette, but for myself. A record of what happened, what we'd stopped. The messages stopped, but I still feel it sometimes, a faint hum, a shadow in the corner of my eye. The Otherworld is still there, waiting, watching. It's a mirror, reflecting our world, our fears, our truths. And it's taught me something. We're all haunted, not by ghosts, but by the things we hide, the things we forget. I don't know if I'll ever be free of it, but I know one thing: I won't open the door.